Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. Welcome back to the Art of Healing podcast. This is Dr. Charlize. This episode's going to be a little different from what we usually discuss because we're going to discuss some more, maybe say mystery or esoteric topics. So I'm going to share with you today these 7 natural principles or 7 natural laws that come from a text that's been around over a century called the Kabbalion. So I was introduced to this text as a part of my studies. So I am a Reiki master, but just like with any profession, you want to have ongoing education. And as a physician, I have to earn CME to make sure that I stay up to date. And in my energy medicine work, I've decided to pursue becoming a certified energy healer. So this would open up other healing modalities to me other than Reiki for myself and for my clients. Before we get further into this podcast, I will offer a disclaimer and an apology. You may hear a co-host behind me. And initially, I was going to try to edit her out, but honestly, I think she wants her voice known, so you will hear some commentary from Cutie Pie, who is one of the new additions to my family. It's a long story how she got here, but she's a resident now. She's still working on her manners, so do forgive her. She chimes in the background. Again, I was going to try to edit her out, but, I think she should go ahead and share her story, however inappropriate. All right, let's get into it. So working on becoming a certified energy healer means that I'm learning other healing modalities other than Reiki, which has been fantastic. So I'm learning about traditional Chinese medicine. I'm learning about acupressure. I'm learning about acupuncture, learning about past life healing, karmic healing. So it's a really great expanse of knowledge. It's been just quite a blessing. Part of what I've been learning or was tasked to learn, and a topic that really has stuck with me and I have found a lot more fascinating than I thought. So I thought, I think I'm going to share this, is learning what the Hermetic principles are and learning the 7 natural laws. So the text that I'm referring to is called the Kabbalion. And I believed it was authored in 1908. And the authors of the text are the 3 initiates. The knowledge that's found within this text comes from the great master, also called the Master of Masters, who was also known as the Egyptian god Thoth. And in the text is named as Hermes Trismegistus, was also called scribe of the gods in ancient Egypt. Now, I'm definitely not a historical expert. I'm definitely not an expert on esoteric, arcane, or occult knowledge. However, that background helps us to understand that although this text that I'm referencing, which was authored early in the 20th century, had its origins possibly thousands of years back, the history of this text gets even more interesting, and there's some references in other books I've started reading on the Emerald tablets. As far as the author potentially having existed many, many lifetimes beyond what us humans can understand. So it gets pretty interesting. I won't take us down that rabbit hole. Maybe not this episode, but maybe we'll go down that rabbit hole as far as the god Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, and the Emerald Tablets. But for this episode, I thought it would be nice for us to go over what these 7 principles of nature, the 7 natural laws are, and more importantly, how we can apply these to our daily life. According to the Hermetic principles in the Kabbalion, these 7 natural laws, and they're also called the 7 Hermetic principles, are the following. Number 1, the principle of mentalism. Number 2, the principle of correspondence. Number 3, the principle of vibration. Number 4, the principle of polarity. Number 5, the principle of rhythm. Number 6, the principle of cause and effect. Number 7, the principle of gender. So for this next portion, we'll go into more detail as to each one of these principles, and then just a general way that we can apply these 7 natural principles. And as we get into them, you might find, similar as I did when I started reading this text, that you've actually heard these principles, just didn't really know where they came from. So the first principle is the principle of mentalism, and to quote the Kabbalion, the all is mind, the universe is mental. And this first principle tells us, or this first law, that the reality that we live in is being created consciously and is consciously created, and that we exist within the mind of something that is much greater than what we can comprehend as humans. So the Kabbalion frequently, as it goes into this, the principle of mentalism, is that consciousness is all around us, and we are all conscious. All things have some kind of consciousness, that the universe is all-knowing as well as we are the universe, and that in our plane of existence, our mind create our worlds. So the principles start off pretty big, but how you can apply that, and how I've been applying it, is that our reality, the realm we exist in, is being created by thoughts. So our thoughts can create our reality. And simply put, that if there are things that you want to see more of or things you want to see less of, you simply direct your thoughts to what you'd like to see. So ways you can do this simply practicing positive affirmations. This has recently been one of my favorites. Positive affirmations, just simple statements to program your brain to take over your mentalism, your mental thoughts, and seeing where that takes you. And I found that after practicing positive affirmations myself for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, every day, just simply starting the day by actually just writing a positive affirmation, that the things that I feel and the things that I witness in my experiences really do improve. And I find that I feel better and I put off a better vibe. Even when the positive affirmation, I don't necessarily feel that it jives with me. It's not something that like, oh, I absolutely agree with right on, it doesn't happen instantly, but I find that that effect is subtle. And then throughout the rest of my day, I can feel it. So positive affirmations is one way. Really just being aware of your thoughts, being aware of your mentalism, what is happening. Doing this with simple mindfulness. An aspect of mindfulness is awareness, being aware of what's happening. It sounds simple, but for most of us, we're not aware of what's happening inside of our minds. We get a thought, and the thought takes over, and it tends to run with us and to take us someplace we didn't necessarily want to go, or we didn't need to go. It didn't really help us to go there. So, that first principle, the law of mentalism, that all is mind. Again, big concept, but for myself, just breaking down into that the world I live in is created by my mind. So, in anything that I want more of, I just simply direct my mind to create more of it, and it happens. The second law of the Kabbalion is the law of correspondence. And the quotation that comes from the text is, as below, so above. Sorry, this is my second or third text. So let's try that again. As above, so below. As below, so above. So we've all heard that saying, as above, so below. I've heard it especially as I became more interested in energy medicine. And apparently, and if one of you listeners knows differently, absolutely message me. This comes from this text, as above, so below, and it is the principle of correspondence. So the principle of correspondence tells us that what we experience in our plane or reality isn't only happening here. It is happening above in the heavens or below in the earth or potentially in other places. But basically just saying that whatever we experience here isn't just the here and now, it's a reflection of what's happening all around us. My interpretation of the principle of correspondence is that we experience the here and now, but this is a reflection of what's happening all over, everywhere, heavens, the earth, other realms, other times, other places. So that if we are feeling well and good, likely all is well and good in the heavens and in the earth. Likewise, if we're not feeling well and good, that's what's happening in other places, in the heavens, in the earth below us. So when I think of this principle, it makes me think of our physical health and the health of our planet, and the importance of being aware of our environment and the toxins we put out in our environment, and the toxins that we put into our bodies, or maybe even the toxins that we might put out in our communications or our emotions or our negative feelings. So when we start thinking of this natural principle and that this is law, that as above, so below as above, it makes us just reflect on how we treat our bodies and how we treat our planet, how we treat our community, and how we can do better. So for me personally, makes me think definitely about what can I do better as far as the environment. Are there things that I can do to produce less waste, recycle more, beware of purchasing things that might drive putting out more plastics into the environment, as well as, in my practice, being aware of, recommendations I give to patients. Is this creating more toxins, or will they be putting out more toxins for my recommendation, or is it unnecessary? And same for myself. If I feel like I'm becoming toxic, what do I need to do so that I don't put out more of that and affect the world around me in a negative pattern? So the second law, which is the principle of correspondence. The third principle is the principle of vibration. And according to the Kabbalion, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The third law was the easiest to interpret for me, because what this means is that everything is in motion And if we reference physics and we get into, anatomical science, atoms and quantum physics, we can definitely get a sense of everything in motion. So one thing we know from the study of atoms and atoms and physics is that everything consists of atoms. Atoms consist of a combination of protons and electrons, and they're in constant motion. And even what makes up a proton and electron is in constant motion. It's just these particles are too small for us to perceive, but the properties of an atom have to do with the amount of protons, the amount of electrons, and the way that they spin or in rotation with each other. Of course, matter consists of atoms. So that means that even when we have something that's solid in matter, like my journal here, I perceive that it's not in motion, that it's at rest. But in fact, it is in motion. It's just that it's the atoms are moving in a way that my eyes and my mind can't perceive. And even my perception is motion because it's light traveling across space to my optic nerve that, I perceive that as light and I perceive that object. So nothing being at rest and everything moves and everything vibrates. We know science has absolutely confirmed that for us. But in our everyday life, what that can mean is that if nothing's at rest and everything's at motion, that we are dynamic and that our bodies are dynamic. So as a human, as a person, no matter where you are in life, you're not going to stay still. It's impossible if the atoms that make you don't stay still and the cells that make up your body are constantly in motion or regenerating or moving. There's simply no way that you could stay still or stay stuck or stay in a state of health or a mindset that you don't want to stay in, that in fact you are moving. So it means that in our motion, we want to make sure we direct the motion, that we have awareness of it and know that since we aren't sitting still, we want to direct what happens next in our minds and our bodies. So that's the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves. The fourth principle is the principle of polarity. And according to the Kabbalion, everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pairs of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are intertwined in nature, but to a different degree. Extremes meet. Everything is half-truths, and paradoxes may be reconciled. So the principle of polarity is stating that everything has two sides and there really aren't any absolutes. So that means that if one state exists, the opposite also exists with it. It's right there with it. So realizing that these two opposites are basically one and the same, just different aspects of the same. So that could mean that if there is pain present, the potential for the opposite of pain, pleasure, could be present. Or if being in a state of illness is present, that the opposite is also possible, being in a state of health. So this principle shakes up our thinking because it's easy for us as humans to get locked into saying it's this, it's that, this is right, there's no other answer. And it really challenges us that if something comes into existence, its opposite, which nature wants balance, also comes into existence. So, and I believe in the way it's put in the Kabbalion is that love and hate are two poles of essentially what is a strong emotion, wanting to attract, protect, be near, adore, and then the other end wanting to repel, destroy, destruct, not be a part of, be away from. So if love exists, hate can also exist, and that they're actually one and the same. But the challenge for us is just to realize that If something we want or desire is there, then the opposite might be there. Or if we're going through something that is the opposite of what we want, then there might be some positive that we're moving towards the spectrum of where we want to be. The fifth law is the principle of rhythm. And according to the Kabbalion, everything flows out and in. Everything has its like. With everything that rises, there is a fall. The pendulum swings both ways in everything. So the principle of rhythm reminds us somewhat similar to the second law, the third law, the principle of vibration. The principle of rhythm or law of rhythm describes that everything is constantly moving, similar to a pendulum, where if a pendulum swings its arc to the left, that the laws of gravity are going to return it to the right to the same frequency. And so that if something is at an extreme, it will return to the other side. There will be balance. So this pendulum, again, kind of like, or the rhythm, constant motion, but it reminds us that there's a flow. There's a way that things work. There's a rhythm. And in our own lives, we know that our bodies have a rhythm, that we have a rhythm that we as humans experience as a circadian rhythm, the 24 hours that syncs us with the rise of the sun and the setting of the sun, that our bodies naturally will want to sleep at certain times and want to be awake at certain times. We also know that for female gendered individuals, there are rhythms that correspond somewhat with lunar cycles. So that if you're in the reproductive stages in your life, there's a rhythm that might run from 21 days to 30 days in which you ovulate. The potential to get pregnant is there. If that does not happen, a period will start. And that resets the cycle for that roughly month. And there's some question that, males may have something similar, although their bodies work differently. So there's no need for a cycle to sort of reset things. And then in the human span of life, we also know that we have a life rhythm. We know that our whole lives, depending on how many years you're blessed with, there are the early years of your life where you're dependent on parents, the years that you're growing up, that you're learning to exist in the world, but you still, have that core of support of someone to provide food and shelter, to the rhythm of becoming an adult that survives on your own, to the rhythm of creating your own family and creating things and other things in the world. And then the pendulum, you may peak to a certain point, and then the pendulum brings us back that as we age, we begin to need others more, similar to as we needed others in childhood to help us. That no matter how we fight it, we'll age, we'll have needs, that we may begin to rely more on others till eventually, for all humans, we reach closer to the state of death, which is very similar to how we were when we were born, when we entered our bodies, and as we'll die and we leave our bodies, and we don't have as much control as we exit this realm. So as far as this rhythm in our own lives, the way we can apply it is just really honoring and acknowledging our rhythms and trying not to get away from them. I know for myself, just listening to the rhythm of when I want to go to bed or when I should be going to bed, not pushing past that. Biggest challenge for me lately is not working past the rhythm of when I know I'm no longer productive, that I'm productive of certain hours, then I need to work, and then really surrendering to I'm no longer productive. The whatever needs to go to, do and connect and be has done for the day, and to release that and allow for rest and recovery. So I think for all of us, just being aware of that rhythm. And of course, if we're not aware of it, taking steps to try to get aware of it, little steps that we can take to try to get back in contact with that rhythm. Because we know that with adequate sleep, you function better. We know that if we take care of the rhythms of hunger and elimination, we age better. So that maybe as we follow that huge rhythm of our lives, we can age happier and with more well-being and with more inner peace. So that is the principle of rhythm. These are big concepts, I know. The sixth law is the principle of cause and effect. And according to the Kybalion, every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is not but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So this is the principle of cause and effect. And of course, we've heard the saying cause and effect. But in terms of how do we interpret this and then what do we do with this information, the sixth law tells us that for everything that occurs, it was caused by something. And for everything that happens, it leads to an effect. So I think of that movie, the butterfly paradox, or oh gosh, I did that a butterfly flaps its wings and somehow creates a hurricane. But this sixth law, what it's telling us is that everything has a cause and effect. In the text, and I think I've seen a few other places that you can simply understand this, that luck and coincidence don't really exist. When we're saying that someone was lucky or is a coincidence, what you're saying is that you simply don't know what the cause of what happened. So the principle of cause and effect tells us that there's no luck, there's no coincidence. Are there even miracles? Because what's happening is that the effect that you're seeing, there really was a cause. It's just that from your perspective, you did not see the cause. So in terms of healing and wellness, miracles, A Course in Miracles, I study. It's a text I frequently refer to. I haven't completed all of A Course in Miracles, but I surely hope to try to complete it. But miracles are, basically a wonderful outcome when we didn't think it was possible. But according to the sixth law, you can cause miracles. So basically just understanding that you might not see the effect or the cause of something that happened or occurred, but it was there. As I was reading this text and doing my studies, because I did have assignments that centered around this, the first thing I wondered about is when someone has a devastating occurrence or a devastating diagnosis, or is the victim of something horrible that happens, because our brains automatically go to what was the cause. And not necessarily a comforting thought, but when this principle is applied, it's basically saying that something did cause it. There was a reason, but maybe we can't see it. And for folks that are spiritual, especially, maybe, from a Christian background, often the comfort does come from that this was God's plan. So maybe we don't understand it, but this was something that had to happen. When I'm working with my patients that have very devastating diagnoses, such as, finding out they have cancer that has spread throughout their body, finding that out suddenly and not having a chance to even react to it, they'll often wonder why. And according to this law, there is a why. However, the why may not be accessible at that moment. The why may be too many factors or not enough factors, or they're invisible, or the factors might even be from a different plane, as above, so below, or a different point in time, even another lifetime. So of course, it doesn't help us to feel better, but it does help us to know that our actions have an effect. So maybe keeping in line with acting in our best, acting with our highest good, acting with the highest good of others and how we can serve others. For me, this principle reminds me to keep to the 5 Reiki principles, which is do not worry, do not get angry, work hard, be kind, and be grateful. So that's often an affirmation that I'll go to when I feel lost or overwhelmed or what should I do? and I don't know what to do, or if I don't like my mindset, just going to that and writing it down in my planner, and then reminding myself, just stick to that. What's the worst that can happen if I stick to those 5 principles? So that is the 6th principle, the principle of cause and effect. And we come to the last of the natural laws, or the last of the Hermetic principles, which is the principle of gender. So according to the Kabbalion, gender is in everything. Everything lives, everything has a masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests in all planes. So this last principle, it is somewhat similar to the polarity, but what it's telling us is that gender, in terms of masculine and feminine, exists in all things in all planes. The book is very clear in delineating that although this is gender, this isn't referring to sex or sexuality necessarily, that it's referring to the biological nature of creation, that the creation of all things, living and actually non-living, I think the text says, has a masculine quality and a feminine quality. So in terms of gender and understanding that in all of us, there is a masculine and a feminine, and in all things, all born creatures living, there's a masculine and a feminine. The way I interpret that, as far as, myself and working with my clients, is that when we say masculine, we're thinking, asserting, action, acquiring, going after, the sort of feeling of going out, reaching out, can be more associated with masculine. And when we say feminine, we start to think of the holder, receiving, receptacle, not as passive, the place to grow, to rest. So the way I've started seeing that is that when I'm working with my clients and myself, is when it's time to think of what we want to do to, help them feel more natural, more where they want to be. Does the action need to be active? Does it need to be assertive? Do I need to tell them this will be like increase your number of steps, start lifting more weights, start, that more going out after, seek, find, go after, or are they better doing less? A frequent conversation we have in my practice is less supplements, less. We don't always need to add more. Is the prescription going to be more rest, therapeutic rest, or naps in line? Is a form of meditation that allows for the mind and body to rest would be more of what this person would need to feel their best? And if you correspond that with some of the other laws, that if there's a rhythm to things, there might be a time where we want the more masculine nature of acquire, go after, exert, do more, that will balance out when it's time to come to the feminine, do less and receive and don't go after and don't acquire. So that is the principle of gender. So that's the 7 Hermetic or natural principles. We've covered all 7. It's a pretty dense topic, but in your show notes, I'll put references to where you can learn more, where you can read more for yourself if this is something that calls to you. I did mention a few resources, and what I'll point you to is at healingartshealthandwellness.com. I have some resources. I actually have a library of some downloadable ebooks. I also have programs that you can follow along. These are courses, but a few of those I'm going to make sure that you have links to, because we mentioned using affirmations to change our mind, since everything around us is mental. So I will make sure that you have access to the Big Book of Affirmations. It's a great resource. It's what I've been using. And then I'll also make sure that you have access to some mindfulness tools, including a new course I just posted that takes you through the mindfulness journey, what it is and how to get started. So thank you for joining me. I know this was a dense topic. You may have had to listen to it in parts, but I feel like it's good to get a little esoteric, get into some of that ancient knowledge. When I was called to the name Healing Arts, that was part of, things that I wanted to explore, is ancient text and how some of that ancient knowledge that's may have been lost to us, how does it affect us now? How can we tap into that ancient knowledge? Why should we lose what someone may have known, 7,000 years ago? Why lose it? So check your show notes for those resources. Sign up for my weekly newsletter, particularly because we have live events started. We had a live event February 24th. We will have another live event coming up, the masterclass on March 23rd. And I will also be announcing future live events for us to connect. So this is a great time if you haven't signed up for my weekly newsletter, where I give updates on what's going on and when it's coming. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about healing arts, health, and wellness. Thank you. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.